Plex used to be the default answer for self-hosted media, and honestly, for a very long time, over a decade, it earned that reputation. But over the years, the story around Plex has changed quite a bit. Price increases, data breaches, privacy backlash, just a huge number of missteps, with features getting shuffled behind paywalls, controversial product decisions, and a pretty major shift away from being just a personal media server. So in this video, I want to take a look back at the history of Plex, where it came from, and how we got to where we are today, with Plex announcing their lifetime pass increase, their Plex Pass increasing in price to $750, and why so many people in the self-hosting world are now seriously looking at alternatives like Jellyfin and MB. So I don't mean this video to be just an endless rant, and there is a link in the description down below to the blog post I'll be referencing throughout this video. Because I know a lot of you are probably grandfathered in to the Plex Pass. Like myself, I bought Plex Pass for $75 in 2014. So why should I care? Why am I on my soapbox all week about the enshittification of Plex? For me, it's like I just said, it's the move away from the core audience to, well, I'm not quite sure where. And I think the signal that we've received from Plex Towers this week is that they're kind of out of ideas too. So let's work our way through the last 15 years of Plex as a product, try and understand where the Plex Pass came from, and try and talk about where it might be going next. Okay, so as I say, this blog post is linked in the description. Let's talk a little bit first about what Plex is. It's a bring your own files media server. So essentially what that means is you have a bunch of hard drives in the basement or under the stairs, or even just connected to a Raspberry Pi, honestly. And you can basically self-host your own version of something like Netflix or Spotify. The idea is it's on hardware that you own, you control, and I can't avoid the elephant in the room. Most of the time, the files that we stream through Plex and these other types of services are obtained through slightly less than nefarious means. Let's just be honest about the situation. Piracy is going to be mentioned throughout this video and is part of the conversation with Plex now for many years. You can, of course, obtain media relatively legally by ripping discs that you've purchased from wherever you buy discs these days. I think charity shops, thrift stores, you can rent them from or borrow them from your local library or whatever. So there are some legal ways to obtain media, but I would wager, and I don't have any evidence for this, I'm just going off instinct, that the majority of people using Plex are probably using it to stream pirated content. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think so. Anyway, the idea of Plex, like I say, is to stream those files to all of your devices. So the files sit on your server. You then install clients on those client devices, so like your TV, your phone, an iPad, laptop, whatever, and you can access those files anywhere in the world and stream them and real-time transcode those files to be compatible with those clients, so you don't have to worry about codec incompatibilities and stuff like that. Plex began life as a fork of XBMC, the Xbox Media Center, and this was originally a macOS only app. Plex was originally a macOS only app, written in May 2008 by Ilan Feingold, or forked in May 2008. Cody's own wiki, XBMC renamed themselves to XBMC, and they note that newer Plex clients were later rewritten and are no longer based on the originally forked code. Kind of sidesteps some weird licensing, open source licensing issues that were going on, because licensing has been a particularly messy area for Plex throughout its history. XBMC was GPL based, and in the early days, Plex, as a consequence, inherited a bunch of open source obligations. We've just seen a whole bunch of hoo-ha with that with Bamboo Labs over the last couple of weeks. So maintaining your open source obligations is important, and so Plex had to rewrite a bunch of stuff so that they weren't shackled by that history. Some Plex client code has remained open for compliance reasons, but the core Plex media server code is not open source. Now, if we're not going to run Plex, you will see in pretty much every Reddit thread or any kind of comment section about Plex, people just parrot the same answer. Well, if we're not going to run Plex, just run Jellyfin. So let's look a little bit about what Jellyfin is so you've got a full picture of the ecosystem. Now, to answer what Jellyfin is, we need to talk a little bit about MB. MB came from the lineage, or a separate lineage from XBMC, with a project called Media Browser, and it forked that in March 2015. Jellyfin is a fork of MB. I actually thought until I prepared this video that Jellyfin was a fork of XBMC and Plex back in the day, but no, it's not. It's a fork of MB. And the split here occurred in 2018 when MB version 3.5.2 made some moves towards a more closed source model, much to my own personal chagrin at the time, actually, because I'd just bought an MB Premier Pass. But anyway, that's a different discussion. Jellyfin is the free continuation, the free software continuation of the original MB mission, and a free and open source version to both MB and Plex. The maintainers of Jellyfin have gone on record many times saying that they have turned down all sorts of kind of crazy offers to let Jellyfin be bought out, or who knows what. I'm just speculating there, but there are public record comments on Reddit and things like that of the Jellyfin maintainers saying, you know, they have their heads screwed on, and I think we can trust the Jellyfin project to do the right thing over the long term and maintain its kind of core open source principles. So now let's dig in a little bit to a timeline of events over the last decade plus of Plex Pass, because that's where this is all going wrong for Plex at the minute, is the Plex Pass. So I do think that Plex as a company needs to continue to exist in order for the masses to continue to use Plex, because it's a service. It's a cloud service. They have a cloud authentication layer. They provide electronic program guides for their live TV options. All of the streaming stuff we'll get to throughout this list. So if Plex, the company, goes away, so does your ability to even log into the Plex Media Server core software. So why should you care? That's why you should care, because if Plex goes away because they can't find a business model, you can't log into your Plex anymore. Okay, so August 2012, the Plex Pass launches. It was framed as an early access program to support the project, and there were private forums, premium feature testing, and the launch price was $3.99 per month. That was in August 2012. Now, in November 2012, Plex Sync became an early premium feature. Plex Sync let users reformat and load media onto devices for offline viewing, otherwise maybe known as downloads. That was announced as a Plex Pass only feature in November 2012. The next thing I've got on my list is September 2014 with the first Plex Pass price hike. Plex announced new pricing effective September 2014. The monthly price increased from $4 to $5, annual from $30 to $40, and lifetime from $75 to $150. Now, this is notable for me personally because it was that Plex Pass price hike that led me to actually purchase Plex Pass lifetime for $75 back in September 2014. In November 2014, Plex Home and parental control tiering was introduced, which allowed people to manage users and introduced fine access controls, and some multi-user features became free at that moment. More advanced home and sharing controls stayed locked behind the Plex Pass paywall. In July 2015, there was a forum security breach and Plex's forum was hacked. The Have I Been Pawned website listed 327,000 exposed accounts, including things like emails, IPs, username, and weakly implemented salted password hashes. Plex advised users to reset passwords and reports that a ransom was demanded in response to that breach. By the way, each of these items I have provided sources for, so if you want to find out more about them, go to the link blog post in the description and you can look at all of the sources for all this information. Where possible, I've tried to link to archive.org links so that this remains a fairly a long-lived article if the Plex website goes down for any reason. Now, in September 2016, Plex added DVR as a beta feature to Plex Pass for, it was originally tied to HD Home Run, which is a TV tuner, like a network-based TV tuner. It's pretty cool, to be honest with you. And this was a really cool feature. Plex are still in their innovation phase, and they're still doing the right stuff at this point. December 2016 sees the addition of hardware transcoding in preview. This was added in Plex Media Server 1.4.0, and it was introduced as a Plex Pass only feature to Windows, macOS, and Linux. The early support included Intel graphics, and the current Plex docs still list hardware accelerated streaming today as a premium feature, but there are some notable exceptions. Again, I learned in the prep for this video. The NVIDIA Shield and the WD, the Western Digital MyCloud Pro PR2100 and 4100 servers don't require a Plex Pass subscription to get hardware-based transcoding. The more you know. June and August 2017 saw that the live TV and DVR features were solidified into Plex Pass proper, and Plex added live TV and later expanded time shifting and DVR support to that area of the product. Now, August 2017 saw some privacy policy changes, and the backlash, and I think really the community sentiment around Plex began to turn at this point. A proposed policy removed users' ability to opt out of some data collection, prompting fears about things like library tracking. And again, this points largely to a self-identification of Plex's user base being concerned about their libraries of media containing perhaps nefariously obtained contents being leaked to advertisers and other agencies that could do things with that data. In their defense, Plex did revise this policy at the time and restored the opt-out controls. December 2017 saw the introduction of Plexamp, the frankly fantastic music player that Plex still offers to this day. Plex Labs, I think this was, so I interviewed Elan Feingold, who was the original creator of Plex, for the self-hosted podcast many years ago. And all he worked on by that point was Plexamp. This is where his head is at, and I think continues to be at. Plexamp is fantastic, and it was launched in December 2017 to be a Winamp-inspired desktop music player for Plex music libraries. It really is great, and there isn't really in the Jellyfin universe a solid alternative yet, although I hope that will change over time. October 2018 saw Plex Cloud and feature retirements for the first time. Plex are starting to cancel stuff. They're starting, dare I say, give things the Google treatment. Plex retired Watch Later, the recommended mode, and Cloud Sync and plugins. Plugins was a big one because it allowed people to extend Plex, and there have been commentaries now where people are suggesting that Plex remove the ability for plugins in order to be able to add features that were plugins to Plex Pass later on and monetize those things. I don't know about that. I just think there was a maintenance overhead, but I could certainly see where some of those commentary, some of those things are coming from. But Plex in October 2018 also shut down their hosted Plex Cloud service. Now, some of you may not know, but back in this period, Plex actually offered Plex. You could literally subscribe to a Plex server in the cloud and bring your own content that way. Plex would host it and that kind of stuff. Obviously, huge bandwidth and storage requirements meant that it wasn't profitable. I don't know why they thought they could ever make a profit doing that, but they did. They tried it. Anyway, it was retired in October 2018. Now, November 2018 saw the addition of a TIDAL integration. This was so cool because it allowed you to fill the gaps in your music library with the TIDAL catalog. So if you've got a bunch of CDs that you ripped before you sent them all to the charity shop, like I did, you could fill the gaps in that collection with a streaming service as well, but still maintain that TIDAL, that Plexamp front end and that self-hosted kind of feel for everything. That was a really cool one in November 2018. Let's fast forward now to July 2019, because I think this is a huge turning point for Plex as a company and Plex as a project. The Verge very publicly gave Plex a massive dressing down. Tinfoil hat time, or a conspirator hat time. Did The Verge do this because they are owned by a massive media conglomerate and Plex and piracy is a threat to that? Maybe. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. But this article featured on The Verge highlighted Plex's role in private shared library, kind of like private Netflix streaming clubs. I should say at this point that people were charging for access to Plex servers and sharing them out for hundreds of users. I think Plex has a limit of 100 shared users per server. And so people were making money off streaming pirated content off of their servers. That was never, in my opinion, going to be it was never going to end well for anybody. And The Verge highlighting this was a good thing, honestly, if you ask me. We're talking about mass industrial scale piracy, streaming, farming, and people charging for access to these Plex streaming servers. And it really served to emphasize the piracy problem that Plex had, still has, and will probably always have. Just the nature of the beast. And the reason I bring this Verge article up is because the next few years, I think Plex are just on the defensive. They're trying to find a business model that makes sense without acknowledging the elephant in the room. Because in December 2019, Plex added ad-supported streaming for the first time. They had a whole library of C-tier movies, honestly, which streamed in over 200 countries, but they were ad-supported. And this marked a huge pivot for the company beyond personal libraries into studio-backed streaming. April 2020 saw Plexamp 3.0 relaunch. It was completely rewritten and relaunched across desktop and mobile as a Plex Pass app. This is great. I actually think this is exactly the kind of innovation that Plex could and should be doing. And coverage at the time noted that search and recent plays included not only stuff on your server, but also podcasts, and also, remember the TIDAL integration that launched previously? You could also search TIDAL in Plexamp as well. So Plex was becoming this single point of access, this single sheet of glass to access all your music, both personal and streaming. And Plexamp 3.0 was great, is great. Plexamp is a highlight in the Plex ecosystem and continues to be. May 2020, the Skip Intro plugin was added. This is also great. Plex saw what Netflix and the cloud, streaming providers were doing and decided to innovate and do something really cool and use content ID matching and audio fingerprints to figure out where intros were in TV shows. Really great feature, and that launched in May 2020. Also in May 2020 was CVE 2020, a flaw where an attacker with admin account access could abuse camera upload to execute malicious code. And this is interesting, really, just as an anecdote, because it highlights the maintenance burden that Plex has. Every time they add a new feature to Plex, and most Plex servers spend most of their life exposed to the public internet, attackers will inevitably find those flaws and then find an exploit for them. July 2020 saw free live TV expand Plex's ad business. Plex launched free live TV in 220 countries with over 80 channels at launch, further broadening its shift towards ad-supported streaming. In addition to the movie streaming they did in December 2019, we can probably extrapolate and infer that was working and it was bringing in nice revenue for the company because they expanded to live TV in July 2020. So in less than a year, what was it? When was the Verge article? July 2019 to July 2020, there are now 2 ad-supported ways of supporting the Plex company. Now, July 2021 through March 2022 saw Plex Arcade launch. This was a really cool way to stream retro games from your Plex server to your Plex clients. It unfortunately didn't live for long, only a year and a bit, and it kind of got the killed by Google treatment in the process. Remember Stadia? It was a similar vibe. Like it came, it went. It's a shame because it was a cool feature. Now we get to April 2021, because I think this is, again, it's another huge inflection point in Plex's history. Plex raised $50 million of private growth equity investment. Only about $15 million of that was new capital, with the rest being used to buy shares and options from employees and shareholders. Now, not much is publicly known about this deal, but we all know that whenever you accept investment from anybody, it changes your motivation and your accountability scales a little bit. As soon as you accept that money from an external source, the business model has to change to accommodate, eventually, I suppose, repaying that investment. Nobody's going to invest money in something that's just they're never going to see the money again. And so for me, April 2021 is a huge moment in Plex's history, and I think it drives the rest of the story that we're about to uncover. Now, December 21 saw another CV exposed and a local Windows privilege escalation flaw. Just something that, background noise. Plex has maintenance to do. Like they need to patch stuff that's on the public internet in order to keep the Plex servers secure. Not much happened until April 2022, where Plex launched the Universal Watch List and cross-service search. They also launched Discover, to a very mixed response, but it was presumably aimed at trying to become a one-stop shop for all of your streaming needs. I think the idea was that, across Netflix or Hulu or Plex even, you search for it once on Plex, and then you will find the surface you want to stream it through, and then maybe rent it or whatever. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of this one, if I'm honest. August 2022 saw an account database breach, and another breach this time was where a third party accessed emails, usernames, and encrypted bcrypt hash passwords. Plex forced account password resets, and they said no payment data was compromised or stored. February 2023 saw we had skip intros added last year, but in February 23, Plex added skip credits. Again, another great feature. Love that one. The innovation to add that stuff. It's exactly what we want to be able to see. Plex's own free streaming catalog also got that feature as well, not only on personal libraries. So, no notes there. That's a good thing. March 23 is interesting because LastPass got breached. And they got breached because an employee's computer had Plex on it. Fascinating stuff. Not really Plex's fault. CVEs happen and it was patched, but still, it's an interesting anecdote in the history of Plex. July 2023 sees Plexamp itself becoming free. It was originally added as a Plex Pass feature, and it's now worked its way down the funnel to become a free feature. Although advanced features such as downloads, Sonic Sage, and some of the guest DJ kind of smart features, those do remain behind Plex Pass, but the core Plexamp experience is now free. Again, Plexamp is a highlight in the ecosystem, so the more people that can use it, the better. Now, do you remember in July 19 when The Verge talked about how Plex has a piracy problem? Well, in September 2023, that problem reared its ugly head once again, with Hetzner basically banning anybody that they detected was running a Plex server. Again, this just sparked yet another anti-piracy debate and caused more legitimization issues for Plex as well. It's a problem that's not going away. September 2023 saw that rear its ugly head again. Then in November 23, this one I found personally quite egregious. The Discover Together privacy, they sent out these emails called Your Week in Review, which basically told everybody else on your server what you'd been, or everybody else that you were friends with on Plex, what you'd been watching. Now, I don't have anything particularly sensitive on my Plex server, but that's not the point. The point is, I didn't really ask or want for that to happen. Plex isn't a social network. So why on earth would they think I would want other people to know what I've been watching? They ended up pissing a bunch of people off, myself included. And again, it's just slowly turning the oil tanker of customer sentiment away from Plex being a good guy towards Plex being kind of out of touch in a lot of critical ways with their user base. February 2024 saw the launch of movie rentals, and this is kind of cool. I mean, I don't have anything against this one. They launched a movie rental store with over 1,000 titles in it. Coverage, though, criticised the limits of this with very US-focused availability. Content licensing is hard, so sure, be annoyed about that, but it's you launch a streaming service where people can rent movies, and we'll see how you do. But there was no 4K HDR and no downloads, but again, licensing is hard. But this is a way, I suppose, that Plex are trying to legitimize their business, and I find it interesting that this came fairly recently after the September 2023 thing. It's almost like Plex were reminded that this piracy thing was a problem, so they go, all right, well, let's launch something in February. I mean, I have no idea how long they were in talks to launch this thing in February with the movie studios, but I don't know, it's just interesting. Like, I'm trying to connect the dots here. I'm not a Plex insider, I'm not an employee, never have been, never will be. Certainly not after this video. It's just interesting to connect these dots together, I think. Now, April 2024 through June 25 saw an interesting lawsuit where Plex faced a proposed class action lawsuit alleging that it shared viewing histories with Facebook, or Meta. The suit advanced in March 25 but was voluntarily dismissed in June 2025. I'm not actually sure why. It's just, again, it's an interesting thing that we had long, as a community, been thinking or kind of accusing Plex of sharing our watch history, and then a lawsuit launches with that exact allegation. It's just interesting. Again, connecting the dots. October 2024 saw the TIDAL integration removed from Plex, unfortunately, and this meant that Plexamp would no longer be able to connect to TIDAL. Huge loss, hasn't been resolved. I guess, I don't know, there was just not enough money in it for TIDAL, or it was too expensive for Plex to keep, giving up such a slice of, I don't know. I don't know the business model behind it, but it was a real shame to see this one go because I used the TIDAL integration a lot and I really miss it. I think by not having an alternative to TIDAL in Plex anymore, we've ended up in a situation where it encourages music piracy, whereas where TIDAL was piracy isn't it's a problem of friction. It's as simple as that, in my opinion. It's not a cost problem necessarily, although a year of Netflix now is $300 and some, and then you need how many stream? There is an issue of cost, but it's mostly a friction problem. A lot of these things like Sonar and Radar and all of these different apps that you can use, they are just, the user experience is just better, and I don't need to care what streaming service something is on. You get the point. Removing TIDAL was an unfortunate thing, and I would love to see some kind of a replacement for that. That would be kind of cool. April through November 2025, this is where Plex started to raise the price. Now, admittedly, they haven't really raised the price in a decade, and inflation and all that, had been going on for a while at that point. So they raised the prices for the monthly and the annual and the lifetime passes. Lifetime went from $150 to $250. Remote personal playback also became a paid feature at this point, so you couldn't stream files outside of your home network anymore unless you were a Plex Pass subscriber. Myself and Robbie from NAS Compares, we got on our soapboxes at the time and made a podcast episode about how we thought that 250 wasn't even close to being enough. Like, if they were going to raise lifetime to be this aspirational thing, they should have at least have gone to 500. And so, I'm not actually annoyed that they've gone to 750 this year. They should have just gone harder last year. But it was a sign of things to come, let's put it that way, that maybe that $50 million bill was coming due, or maybe the ad-supported... I don't know. I don't know what the motivation for this really is. Plex like to tell us it's so they can invest more in the platform. I'm just not seeing... I'm not seeing huge strides forward here that support that kind of thinking. August 25 saw another CVE launch. Not too terribly interesting. It was patched. September 25 saw another security incident where an unauthorized third-party accessed emails, usernames, and secure hashed passwords, as well as authentication data from a database as well. Plex users were told to reset their passwords and SSO sessions as a consequence. Which brings us to last week. May 2026, where Plex hiked the price of their lifetime pass to $750. I've talked about it at length in this video up here, and I think it's the beginning of the end of Plex, honestly. I think it's a sign that Plex are out of ideas and they don't really know what to do. The lifetime passes, of course, at $250, paid for themselves pretty quickly on the monthly subscription. So I'd be interested to see what data they had behind the scenes on how they came to the $750 number. Because again, if you're going to go for some stupid big number, you may as well go for $1,000 or something. I don't know. But anyway, my conclusions from this is that really, over the last decade, we've watched Plex flail around looking for a viable business model. And whilst the Plex Pass started as a paid supporter tier for early access and was, and to some degree is still genuinely useful with things like hardware transcoding, I know a lot of you are sat there going, yeah, but why should I care? I paid for it a decade ago and it's going to continue to work and the client support's good and yada, yada, yada. But Plex, the company, has never been able to escape the piracy shadow. And it's also spent years drifting away from the core audience of people who put Plex where they are now. I said it in a previous video, but like, where is audiobook support? I mean, where is it? I just think the only outcome for this, where Plex survives, is that they become a broader streaming portal. They continue to enshitify. They continue to add ads. They continue to find ways to monetize the existing user base they've already got. And you know, all of your lifetime subscribers being grandfathered in, like, they're never going to see another dollar from me ever again. And it's a tough situation to be in. But all of this has led me towards the conclusion that if I want a media streaming platform that's going to be with me for the rest of my life, Jellyfin is the only solution. It's free software in the truest sense. It's open source and it's free as in cost. They actively don't encourage donations. They want people to contribute in terms of time and effort and code, which is great, you know? So with that in mind, I am going to be launching something called Jellyfin June. I'm going to ceremoniously delete my Plex instance on June the 1st. And I want you to try and come along for the ride. Throughout the month of June, I'm going to make several videos where I go into the process of looking at all the different clients for different platforms, because clients is a huge part of the puzzle, and it has gotten a lot better with Jellyfin lately, but it's still not perfect, and we'll cover all of that throughout Jellyfin June. So you can look out for 1, 2 or more maybe videos or live streams a week throughout June, where I'll go into details on clients, music streaming clients, the plugin ecosystem in Jellyfin, which is amazing, by the way, subtitles, how to get your artwork set up properly, how to set it up in Docker, on TrueNAS, on Unraid, on Proxmox, all these different things. So you can look out for me on Mastodon. I'll put a link to that in the description down below, where I'll be using the hashtag JellyfinJune to track the entire experiment. And my hope is that by the end of June, Plex is done in my life. I hope you'll come along with me for the ride and try out Jellyfin and give it another chance. If you haven't tried Jellyfin in at least 6 months, it's definitely worth another look. It's changing and improving all the time. And with the Jellyfin 12 release on the horizon as well, I'm really excited to see where it goes. So thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I've been Alex from KTZ Systems.